Grit, toughness, consistency, smash mouth. That's what Dan Campbell has tried to build in Detroit. The Lions might be the best team in the NFL, and Dan Campbell's to thank for that. The team where Dan Campbell was hired, ridiculed, mocked, laughed at. Look who's laughing now. The Detroit Lions are laughing now. Jared Goff is, Amon-Ra St. Brown is. You get the picture. Never have I seen a team built perfectly for a city like the Lions are built for Detroit. The downside, well, they lost Aiden Hutchinson, but will the Lions miss a beat? Let's talk about the Lions culture. The Detroit Lions are a really good football team. And it goes to show that sometimes first impressions don't matter. And usually they do. Your gut instincts will tell you, hey, this is right, this is wrong. But Dan Campbell came into the league, and everyone, including myself and media, there is nobody who didn't laugh at Dan Campbell and said Dan Campbell is above skis. Dan Campbell's busting kneecaps and his culture, and they're going to play smash mouth, and he's angry and he's yelling, and this is what Detroit football's all about. And we all laughed. We sat there and laughed at him. Detroit is fantastic, and they have built their football team, the football team, inside out, offensive line, defensive line. And then we'll put in a quarterback who's talented in Jared Goff, give him time to protect to good weapons, and they're going to feast. If you are a Detroit Lions fan, be happy right now. Be thrilled right now. You got a team that could, look at the names that have come through Detroit. Barry Sanders, maybe one of the most talented, if not most talented running back of all time. Calvin Johnson, he's not the greatest wide receiver of all time, but he's arguably the biggest specimen and one of the most amazing wide receivers of all time. You couldn't win with them. They retired early because Detroit's culture was so bad. Dan Campbell comes in and turns it all around like it's nothing. You're lucky to have Dan Campbell. And Dan Campbell's lucky to have a fan base like Detroit that understands his grit, his toughness, and what it's all about. And that's Detroit Lions smash mouth football. And it just goes to show, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. There's a book called Blink, where your first instinct is usually right. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes that instinct you get the first time you feel something, question it. And that's what we should have done with Dan Campbell. That's what we should have done with the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell is an amazing, amazing coach because he's built a culture. And sure, he's not sitting there. Maybe he's not the X's and O's guys. But you know what? His team believes in him. His fan base believes in him. And most importantly, he believes in himself and his philosophies. Dan Campbell is a freaking monster of a head coach. The Detroit Lions are building something special. I know they lost Aiden Hutchinson, but Dan Campbell gave perfect answers about if they're still a Super Bowl contender. They're not going to quit. They'll probably rally around this. He's probably using this right now and telling them, hey, everyone, no one believes us anymore. And they'll go play harder. The next guy will step up, and the Detroit Lions will play good football.